Let's cross live then to Beijing, where Xi Jinping has just started to speak.
Reiterated the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity of other nations, as these are fundamental principles that we have to uphold. We are going to ensure that development benefits both of our countries. Just a few moments ago, President Macron and I witnessed the signing of a number of agreements for cooperation for aeronauticals, civil nuclear power, green development, new technologies. And these are all pivotal areas for future development and growth of our respective nations. And also we focused on other key areas such as carbon neutrality and training and carbon neutral training programs. We would like to reiterate that China is going to continue to open up its country to the world, to foreign countries, and to new opportunities. France is a key driver in developing our further relationships, and we have seen in the past. France will be a guest of honor in future relations and future events when we focus on striking a new balance. Because we need to ensure that companies working within Chinese borders can do so normally. And that is why France will be part of future trade discussions. The coming year will be the year for Franco-Chinese tourism. As part of that, we will continue to drive exchanges between our nations, be it for education or tourism. Our shared objective is to ensure that the Olympic Games in 2024 can go ahead as planned, and we will ensure that can happen. Also, we will uphold our efforts to focus on a multifaceted approach through multilateralism that came out post-Cold War. We will also work together. We'll work together in the lead up to the United Nations Conference on the High Seas to ensure that the conference will go ahead. This also marks the 20th anniversary or the beginning of relationships between China and Europe, and we will strive to bolster dialogue in all areas. And with the President of the European Commission, President Ursula von der Leyen, we will hold tripartite meetings between France, China, and the European Union. The objective of said meetings is to focus on strategic autonomy that Europe is striving for. The aim is to not just follow or be subject to the will of others. The aim is to ensure that all parties can push forward autonomously. As for the crisis in Ukraine, China continues to make an appeal for peace and for a political solution to be found. And with France, we call for restraint from all international partners. Because if not, then the situation will become a situation that can no longer be controlled. We need to ensure that civilians and civilian facilities will be protected. We need to ensure that nuclear weapons are not used. And we condemn any use of biological warfare as well. We are against the use of bombing against civilians. And we want everyone to ensure that the solution that comes out of this is a long-term, stable solution. We seek to work together to protect the future relations with Ukraine in all domains, be it financial, economic, or even agricultural. We also seek to draw light to the attention of the fact that developing nations are also suffering the fallout from this crisis, and we need to tackle against that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President, Ministers, Ambassadors, journalists. I would like to thank you first and foremost for welcoming us here today. Some 3 years after my initial visit, where we both met in Shanghai, and over these past 3 years we have continued to maintain channels of communication open despite the pandemic. And given all that has happened, I would like to thank you for meeting us here today in Beijing and tomorrow in Canton. And also, I would like to thank you for meeting with me here today, but also in light of our upcoming trilateral meeting between yourself, myself, and the President of the European Commission. And this is just another milestone in a long journey of relations that started back with Juncker and Macron many years ago.
En partant de nos imaginaires communs sur les routes de la soie, pour tracer littéralement de nouvelles pistes de coopération.
Our cooperation is one that is building upon a long history of cooperation that dates back to our respective understandings of the Silk Road. But now we're striking a form of balance. And I would say that the times that we have just lived have accelerated change, accelerated cooperation. And now I feel that we have come to a form of understanding. France and China, as permanent members of the UN Security Council, because of their history and because of their love for independence and the fact that we believe so deeply in that as a principle, we work together to build or to preserve a sense of global order that has stood the test of time. We work to ensure peace and stability, and we have the ambition to tackle very modern issues. To talk of peace and stability, well, there are many topics that we could discuss either today and tomorrow, especially when focusing on what is happening in the Middle East, the coming together, coming closer of Saudi Arabia and Iran, which is a welcome change. We could also speak of Lebanon and the sense of stability that needs to be brought into the region. We could also talk about the situation in North Korea and Iran. But to speak of peace and stability today, obviously that means we have to speak of war that is being waged by Russia in Ukraine. And you just spoke of that. And if I could just touch on that as well. This is a war that brings an end to decades of peace on the European continent. But this is a war that affects us all, as you mentioned. Because a permanent member of the UN Security Council decided to violate the very charter that governs that council. So therefore, through diplomatic means, we have sought to remind Russia of its obligations, of its duties, to remind it of the fact that territorial boundaries are part and parcel of its sovereignty. And we have pushed to defend the UN Charter. Also, we take very seriously the matter of nuclear powers, and I'm sure you understand that France agrees with you in saying that nuclear warfare should not be part of any way forward, and there are certain treaties to that effect, and we need to ensure that no countries who do not have nuclear warfare be given such capabilities, because that too would go against a number of commitments made by yourself, that we have made, and that many other countries in the world have made. Another point that you just reminded is that there is a humanitarian issue at stake here. Russia is violating certain humanitarian law, especially when they target children. And therefore, we need to speak out against this action and speak out against impunity. We therefore need to defend a number of items, and that is what we can talk about, because we need to build sustainable peace, long-term peace. And we can only have long-term peace. We can only have that if we have all people on board, if we have the Ukrainian people, but it's also if we can have the Russians at the discussion table. And I feel that Europe needs a stable security for the future. And stability and peace cannot be possible if we are busy dealing with situations like what is happening in Ukraine. We can consider that Ukraine is a European country, and therefore we cannot consider there is a stability on our continent, insofar as we still have a country that is being invaded by one of its neighboring powers. So what we have discussed is a number of principles, and I agree with a number of the principles that we have already discussed. But I hope that in the very near future, we will be able to have a much more demanding conversation between each other and with Russia, so that we can remind Russia of these principles. And we wish to do so through our diplomatic avenues. Because this is a matter of sovereignty and territorial integrity for Ukraine. And that is the only condition for long-term sustainable peace. And we need to ensure that there is long-term stability, even if there may be a short-term escalation of the situation. Also, we have a number of shared ambitions. We have the Forum for the New Silk Road. This is one which we will be present of. Also, there is the UN High Commission in forum that will be held in Costa Rica, but also in 2019 we signed a number of important declarations and statements on biodiversity, and we are already bearing the fruits from that at the COP summit in Montreal, and also just in March for the BBNG agreements. So we have a number of commitments and agreements that we have made together for a number of areas, for example, the fight against air pollution, pollution in general. All of this is part of a roadmap leading up to Nice. And this is what we want to continue building upon. And we are coordinating very closely in light of the United Arab Emirates COP28, which will be held shortly. So we have shared ambitions. We also have a global financial compact, and I would like to make special mention of the considerable role that China plays in that, especially when it comes to reforming international financial institutions and coming up with a new response for the poorest nations of the world, because they need to. We need to provide solutions for them, because they are the ones most hard hit by inequality, but they are also the most hard hit by climate change fallout. So we will be meeting with a number of nations, and I hope we can come forward with responses that suit
Enfin, et au-delà des questions
and are
sino-européennes sur
adequate
lesquelles nous
for
reviendrons
those
avec
nations.
la présidente von der Leyen, comme je l'évoquais,
Also,
il y a la
we'll
feuille
be
de route
meeting
bilatérale.
with the
Vous l'avez
President
évoqué,
von
ce
der
partenariat
Leyen, which is a
stratégique,
multilateral
nous voulons,
meeting
et
that
il
we'll be
est
having, but we
au
also
fond
have
très
bilateral
illustratif.
relations. And I think our bilateral
En effet, de
relations
cette vision
are highly
française, et je le crois maintenant
illustrative
pouvoir le dire,
of
européenne.
our French
Ça
view,
fait 5 ans
or
qu'on
dare I say even
entendait
European
défendre
view
la
of the world.
souveraineté
We are
européenne,
fighting for
une
European
autonomie
sovereignty,
stratégique européenne,
strategic
au
autonomy,
service d'ailleurs d'un projet commun, mais aussi parce qu'elle
one
est
that is for that will
jumelle de
better
l'indépendance
serve
française.
our greater project, but it is
Je
also
crois que nous y sommes
because
et que l'Europe est en
it
train de
is
se
one
doter
of our greater
d'une
principles in
vraie
France.
stratégie en la matière, et je pense que c'est
I feel
d'ailleurs
that France has a very clear
l'intérêt de nos
strategy,
amis devrait en ce sens. Et notre feuille de route bilatérale,
and our
je
bilateral
crois, a une
roadmap
totale pertinence à cet
is
égard.
very much relevant
Nous
within
avons
that
donc décidé la
context.
reprise de nos dialogues de haut niveau, qui se
We
réuniront
have,
le plus rapidement possible.
We
Vous
are
en
going
avez
to be
rappelé
continuing
les trois
high-level
formats.
dialogue,
Mais
as
nous
you
avons
mentioned,
aussi
in the
signé
various formats.
beaucoup d'accords
But we've
aujourd'hui,
also
nous
today
l'avons
signed
vu,
a
lancé
number
des
of
travaux
agreements
dans le domaine de
and
la transition
instigated
énergétique,
a
en
large
particulier
area of
avec
work,
de
the
l'expertise
strategic
partagée et beaucoup
areas
d'innovation.
for
Dans le
research and
domaine du nucléaire
innovation,
civil, avec
for
la
civil
préparation d'une
nuclear
étude
power,
complète sur la contribution
where
de ce
we'll be
secteur
looking
à
at
la
a complete
décarbonation de
survey
l'économie,
of
dans
the
le secteur
entire
des
industry
transports,
and the impact that it
avec
can
le travail
play.
commun sur
We've
les
been talking
carburants
about
d'aviation
transport,
durable,
about
la fourniture de
sustainable
méthanol aux
aviation
porte-conteneurs,
fuels.
la contribution des entreprises
We're also
françaises à la
talking about
construction de
France's
métros en Chine, la construction
the
d'éoliennes
contribution
offshore,
of French
et
companies
je ne serai pas complet sans mentionner aussi l'action
to
de
these
l'Agence
various
française
efforts.
de
And
développement
also
qui se
there
focalise
is
en Chine
the
sur la lutte
AFD,
contre
France's
le
foreign
changement
aid
climatique en
development, and all
s'appuyant
of the
sur
work it is
l'expertise de nos
doing to
entreprises.
fight against climate change,
L'ensemble de cette
leveraging
approche repose
the expertise
avant
from
tout
French
sur une plus
companies.
grande réciprocité
And
en
I
vue de
feel that we can
parvenir
have greater
à un nouvel
reciprocity,
équilibre, y compris sur le plan
a new
commercial.
balance, even for trade.
Et nous avons d'ailleurs beaucoup fait ces dernières années en la
We have
matière,
done much over these
sur le
past
plan
few
agricole et
years for
agroalimentaire, et nous allons encore
agriculture,
plus loin.
food, but we will
Bien
take
que
it even
ministre de
further.
l'Agriculture et de la Souveraineté
We have
alimentaire,
the
président du
Minister
cluster
for
maritime de la Réunion,
Agriculture, we have the Minister
témoigner justement de l'importance de ces secteurs
for the
dans
seas,
notre France,
and
qu'elle
that
soit
just highlights
métropolitaine
how
comme
important
ultramarine.
France, both
Et nous avons en
continental
effet
France
beaucoup
and
d'avancées
its overseas
sur tous ces
territories,
sujets.
sees these
Qu'il
issues.
s'agisse bœuf, des vins et spiritueux, en passant donc par l'aquaculture et plusieurs autres, au-delà de ce que
Because
nous
there are so
avons
many
déjà
different
fait
domains
sur le porc.
through farming that we can
Je suis
focus on,
aussi
be
ravi
it through
d'annoncer que les
beef,
consommateurs
fish,
chinois pourront avoir
or
accès
other.
aux produits d'une quinzaine de nouvelles entreprises. Nous allons également
And these
lancer de nouveaux
agreements
chantiers dans la
also
biotech,
cover
continuer
roughly
d'innover
20 out of our companies.
l'ensemble
We
d'une
are also
agriculture
kicking off
durable,
new
avec
research
toujours
for
la
sustainable
préoccupation de la
farming
sécurité
practices,
alimentaire. Et nous avons
as
progressé dans
in
le sens d'un
finding new
rééquilibrage
ways
de la
of
relation
shoring
dans
up
les
greater
secteurs de
food security.
l'aéronautique, de
We
la
also have
santé,
agreements
des
for aeronautics,
cosmétiques,
for
de la finance.
health,
Et nous
cosmetics,
aurons l'occasion tout
finance.
à l'heure de dire quelques mots devant
And I'm sure that in just a
notre
few
Conseil des
moments we will
entreprises
be able
franco-chinoises, lancé
to
en
speak
2018,
before
je crois,
the French-Chinese
là aussi
Council
une
for
avancée importante.
Business,
Ce
which was
dialogue, vous
created
l'avez
just
rappelé,
recently.
Président,
The dialogue that you
qui
were
est permanent,
talking
mais
of,
nous allons
Mr. President,
l'intensifier et
is
s'intensifier par
one
la
that
reprise
we
de nos
want to
échanges
ramp up
humains et
in
culturels.
coming years, because it is
Sans
a
revenir
matter
sur
of exchange
cette
of
relance
people
que j'ai
and
évoquée
ideas.
hier en lançant justement le festival Croisement.
You
Je
spoke
tiens à
of
souligner la
the
perspective du 60e
Croisement
anniversaire de nos relations
Festival,
bilatérales,
and that is
le
just a
lancement
highlight
de
of
l'année
our
franco-chinoise du
bilateral
tourisme
relations.
culturel
There is
l'année prochaine, en
also
2024.
next year,
Ce
2024,
sera une
which will be
occasion de
the year
valoriser
for
notre
French-Chinese
patrimoine, nos
tourism.
métiers d'art
It will be a way for
et
highlighting
l'ensemble
our
de nos
heritage,
secteurs
our
culturels.
arts, our
Et je salue ici
cultural sector.
la présence de
And
plusieurs
we have
représentants de
here
ces institutions
today
culturelles
a number of
et de
representatives from
notre
our cultural
cinéma, de notre
sector.
musique, de nos musées, de nos
But it's
théâtres,
also
de
about
notre
exchanges
littérature
between
à
our
laquelle
theatres,
je sais
our
que vous êtes
museums, all of our
tellement attachés,
cultural
que nous
institutions,
échangeons et nous allons
ones that
continuer
I'm
pendant la
sure
pandémie.
you believe in
Des livres,
greatly,
nous continuerons
and which we
d'avancer
also
sur
believe in,
cette coopération.
because that
Je me
is a
félicite
form
de
of
la
cooperation that
réouverture
we
récente, et
can
donc
continue to
nous
push forward.
voulons retrouver au moins le niveau d'échange
We
aérien
want to
d'avant la
get
pandémie,
back to the same level
faciliter
of
évidemment
air-based
les transits, les visas, mais
transit
développer
as we
plus
had
encore
pre-COVID,
ces
and we
échanges,
will
cette
do so by
connaissance
focusing on new
réciproque,
visa
ces
programs,
traductions,
but we want
ces
it to be
créations communes
reciprocal
qui sont si
because it
importantes pour nos deux
is
pays.
a two-way road, and
Évidemment,
that
nous
two-way
savons la
road is so
différence de nos
essential for
modèles.
both of our countries.
Et
So this
les
is the
accords qu'on peut
model
avoir,
that we
nous
are
l'avons évoqué, j'y
working on.
reviendrai,
It's one that you and I have
évoqué à chaque
discussed
fois. La
at great
question
length
de
on
la
multiple
situation des droits de
occasions.
l'homme demeure un sujet
But a topic that comes
sujet
back time and time
d'importance
again
pour la
is the
France,
matter of human
d'exigence
rights. It is
respectueuse.
one of
Et ce n'est
France's
pas parce que nous
main
avons des différences qu'on
principles
ne peut
that we
pas les
need to
évoquer
uphold. Now,
d'abord.
it's not because because we
partagées de manière très
have
franche,
differences that we
mais le faire en
can't talk
étant
about them.
respectueux, en
But we need to
considérant
do so
pas en quelque sorte
respectfully.
que l'un aurait des leçons à donner à l'autre.
It's not
Et d'ailleurs,
about
j'ai pu
giving lessons.
m'apercevoir que il en va de la Chine comme de la France.
And
Et
it
généralement,
applies to
on
both
arrive à obtenir
France
des
and China.
résultats lorsqu'on est respectueux mieux que quand on donne des leçons.
that we can always garner greater results from any relationship when you build that on one of respect, but not one of superiority we're trying to give lessons. And that is what we want to focus on. We want to focus on one of friendship and respect for our future relations. I dare not speak much longer, but we have major international issues at stake. European autonomy, bilateral relations. As you can see, we have quite a lot on our agenda. But I would just like to reiterate how important it is to continue to discuss, to avoid any form of escalation in our current world, and to show that we work in the interest of our peoples, and that we need to live up to the task that is ahead. And that is why it is so important that we both took out time of our schedules for today's visit and tomorrow's visit. Because today's discussions are about agreements for the future. Times are very worrying. Times are quite tragic, and it is up to us to not give in to the easy way out, to assume responsibility, and to focus on peace to avoid escalation. And I know you too believe in this. You believe in it, and I am here to say that France believes in it as well.
感谢习近平主席、马克龙总统共同会见记者，到此结束。
Merci au président Xi Jinping, merci au président Emmanuel Macron. Ainsi se termine la conférence de presse conjointe.